Hi there, I'm Vicky Parfano. Welcome to my studio. Today I'm doing a double page art spread in my sketchbook using some stamps and stencils. I'll be using Daniel Smith paints, some gold paint and some acrylic paint as well. I love working in art journals and I'll show you my process. So let's get started. First of all, I have a nice cup of tea ready to keep me going, and I have a little sketchbook here that I'm going to use which has prompts in it of some of the things I might like to use. And the first thing I really want to use is some asthenic writing. And I'll show you the colour scheme: undersea green, quinacridone rose, rose of ultramarine, quinacridone gold, and I'm going to add some gold mica paste from Kuretake today, and we'll have some fun with that. I have a list of all the supplies I'm using in the description of the video, and you can purchase these supplies through my Amazon links. Here's the mica paste, and I use VersaFine Clair inks and a set of stencils that came in a pack of 8, which I'm really enjoying. I have some old rubber stamps in the shape of little bees, but I also have these beautiful Sizzix Sunnyside sentiments, which I love as well, and these are listed in the description. This is not in the description, it's just an old Stampin' Up! Stencil which is no longer available, but I think you could find something similar. And my Chiyogami paper, which is Japanese paper, and I love to use that as accents at the end of my piece. It's sort of one of my signature moves, is to add a bit of Chiyogami. Now here I am, I'm just going to start getting into it and completely ignoring my list there. So I think I better go on and have a look at the first thing on the list. Yes, that's asthenic writing. Well, let's get that done first. So with asthenic writing, I like to add something that is really personal for me. So I like to add a positive affirmation. So I am creating some beautiful work today, or whatever you feel you like to put in there. And this is going to be covered up by the paint anyway. So it's kind of a personal signature that goes into my art. And I've been using this on a lot of my art lately. It sets me up for the practice of morning pages, and it helps me add something really personal into my work. And I'm using the same pencil with my non-dominant hand just to draw in some more line work very loosely. And there'll be a lot of loose painting in this tutorial, which for me is very freeing. And I'm just going to add some water to the outside of those shapes so there won't be too many hard edges. I don't mind a few hard edges here and there, that can look good too. Now the quinacridone gold, I'm adding that in as well. And I have quite a lot of water on my mop brush. And this gets the paper covered fairly fast. And the whole point is to work fast and not to think too hard about it. This is intuitive painting. Now I'm adding the rose of ultramarine. And when this mixes with the quinacridone gold, it gives a lovely maroony brown colour, which I really like. And I'm just enjoying myself, having a good play session, making sure I'm moving the paint around, not mixing it too much with the other colours because I don't want it to get too muddy. And now I'm doing one of my favourite techniques, which is drawing into wet paint with Inktense watercolour pencils. And I've chosen 3 or 4 pencils that match the colours of the watercolour paint that I've used, and you can see I'm holding it right at the very end of the pencil. They're very loose lines. I'm using my dominant hand because I want to sketch some loose botanicals, but it's still being held at the very end of the pencil, so it's a beautiful light touch. So I'm going to put some undersea green into these marks and a few other places on the page as well. So already I've introduced 2 lots of botanicals in these very loose leaf shapes, and that's going to get me started on the rest of the composition. I'm treating the 2 pages as one, so it gives me a seamless spread across 2 pages, and this is my favourite way to work in the journal, so that when you open it and look through it, the left-hand page matches whatever's happening on the right-hand page as well. Now I'm going to add some acrylic paint, and this is medium magenta. This is the Liquitex Basics paint, and it's a beautiful, almost a neon pink, and I'm going to use a palette knife to scrape that in areas across the page. And I've just put that into one of my little Kmart dishes. Now this is acrylic paint without any water added, and I plan on scraping through this with a credit card in a minute, just to spread it out even further and create some extra lines in the piece. But you can see how immediately this has given the page a really bright pop of colour. So just take a credit card and scrape it through the paint. And I'm going all in one direction to begin with, and I will cross-hatch that and come back and keep adding to it. And I really enjoy this part of the process. This is definitely part of the play, and allowing that acrylic paint to blend in a little bit with the watercolour paint is a lot of fun. Here's the Rise and Shine sentiment. Now this is a brand new stamp. I've just got it out of its packet. I'm putting a stamping mat underneath. If you don't have a stamping mat, you could use a cellulose sponge from the kitchen or a mouse mat. I'm going to use VersaFine Clear ink. This is Acorn. Now, because this is a brand new stamp and it's just come out of the packet, it's not going to stamp that well right away. So it needs to be seasoned by stamping it on some scratch paper first. So I've got some watercolour scratch paper here, and you can see it doesn't stamp that well when I first use the ink on it. But now that I've stamped it a few times, it should give me a really nice impression. And that's a really important tip when you get a packet of cling stamps. You want to play around with them first and condition them to accept the ink by stamping them off a few times on some scrap paper. I also have the VersaFine ink in Onyx Black, and some of my spreads I use black, but I also like the Acorn because it's a softer touch. This is one of the stencils I have listed in the description here as well. And I'm going to use the Kuretake mica paste and do the same technique. I'm just putting it into a little ceramic dish, not adding any water at all, and taking a craft sponge, and I'm dabbing it through. You don't want to try and push it or force it. I'm also holding the stencil in place with my other hand. And I'm not going to just pull the stencil up. What I'm going to do, when I think I have enough coverage, I'm just going to peek underneath while holding it still with the other hand. So if I have missed any areas, I can easily go back and fix them, because once you lift the stencil up, you can't really put it back down in exactly the same place if you're not holding onto it. And I'll show you how beautiful and shiny that is. But it's also quite subtle. It's blending in with that quinacridone gold, which is what I was hoping. And now I've taken it, washed it, dried it, and I've flipped it over, and I'm going to use some brown to stencil this one. So I'm using raw umber. This is acrylic paint, again the Liquitex Basics, and I have a link to these in the description as well. I like the small sizes. They're great for having a lot of choice of colour, and it's almost like getting a sample pack. So this is looking like a bit of a hot mess at the moment, but wait till you see what happens. And again, I'm holding this in place, and I'm just going to peek under to make sure I haven't missed any bits before I lift it completely off the page. And that's a good impression. Now I'm going to check the back of this stencil. It's clean, it doesn't have any paint on it, so I'm just going to use the very top of it and kind of move it to the right. I've tilted it a little bit. So out of this one stencil, I'm going to get 3 different images. Now I've gone away and I've washed my stencils, I've washed my sponge with warm soapy water, and everything's nice and clean. And now I'm adding some of that gold mica paste through this stencil. I like this stencil because it matches the Chiyagami paper shapes that I add right at the end. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later when we get closer to the end. Now I have an old rubber stamp here which has a little bee on it. I can't remember where this is from. I'm going to use the brown ink again. And I'm going to stamp a small bee. And that's come out really nicely. And this time I'm going to stamp a second bee, but I'm going to tilt the stamp so that it's not in exactly the same direction. I'm going to move it up further and tilt it further sideways so that I get this sense of movement of the bees flying up and around. And now to take off the tape, I'm going to heat it with my heat gun first because I don't want it to tear. Now this tape is Meaden masking tape. I buy it in rolls of 10 packs. So that seems to be a very economical way to buy my tape. But I'm heating it with my heat gun just to ensure that nothing is torn. And you can actually see I have the elastic strap that goes around the album there, and it has still masked off the areas for me really nicely. I like this tape a lot. So when you're taking off the tape, using a heat gun helps, but also keep it slow and low to your table. Don't pull it straight up. You can see how I'm sort of keeping it at the same direction all the time rather than pulling it directly upwards. And that's a perfect tape reveal. I haven't torn it, so I'm happy with that. I really like how it's looking. It's almost there. I just need the final touch, which is my Chiyagami paper accents. So the Chiyagami paper is a Japanese style of paper. It's gold on the one side and it's silver on the other. So if I was doing a blue and green spread, for instance, I could use a silver paper just by flipping it over. And I have a link to this as well. It's beautiful paper to work with. It's super thin. And I'm just going to cut rough rectangles. They're going to be a little bit wonky, and I like a little bit of that in my work, so it's not all too perfect. And I like the idea of using 3 shapes. I tend to always use 3 in my work and put them in different directions. Play around with them first, see where you'd like them to sit before you commit to gluing them down. And I also like for them to stick a little bit outside of the border, just a fraction. See, there's the silver on the other side. Just a fraction outside of the border, just so that they don't blend in completely with the work, but they stand out as an extra element. And I'm using my favourite Tombow multi-adhesive, the liquid glue. This dries clear. It gives you some wiggle room, so you can wiggle this piece around. If it's not entirely where you want it to, you have a chance to move it. And I just use some paper towel to blot up the excess. I usually put on more than I need so that it will be well adhered and, it won't flip up at the edges. And then I can just wipe it off before it dries completely. You can see how you can still move it around a little bit. And I think I'll move that strap. It's getting in the way now. And that's just where I want to put my piece, and just a little bit outside of the border. I hope you enjoyed this project today. I'm just going to finish it off with my magic eraser, my Chuck's Magic Eraser. There's just a few little bits here and there I like to clean up. And I've just put the Chuck's eraser in water and squeezed it out. And now my signature, and we're done. So this is what the journal looks like. And these come in 2 packs. I have a link to those in the description as well. I love the paper in these journals. It holds up to so much wet media, as you can see from this piece today. And I love it. I'm really happy with it. It brings me joy. I hope you give this one a try and try out some of these techniques for yourself. I'm so glad you were able to join me today. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you again next time. Bye for now.